In 2009, I did something drastic with my life. Knowing full well that I was struggling with talking with people, I signed up for a program where I lived and traveled with a group of complete strangers for 9 months. We lived in 3 small towns during that period and did volunteer work around in those areas. The experience changed my life forever, as it was the starting process for me to break out of my shell and be confident in my own speaking abilities as well as myself. I consider this moment as the very first step on my self-improvement journey, as it was something that I genuinely wanted to improve upon in my life. But knowing what I know now and researching on social anxiety, I find that a lot of the information that's online is a little lacking and not as helpful as it could be. Not every single person has the opportunity to just stop everything that they're doing and just travel after all. And so I want to be taking some time to provide a proper alternative to how to break out of your shell. How can someone overcome social anxiety properly without having to travel a great distance or go on this grand adventure, or just to follow just generic advice such as like talk to yourself in front of a mirror for God knows how long. But before I delve into that, I want to take some time to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video in the first place. And if you are new to the channel, I would recommend to subscribe to this channel because, one, it is my channel after all, and also it will help out a lot with the algorithms and such to subscribe to my channel as well as to go and leave a like on this video. But anyway, enough of the self-promotion. I want to be talking about how to be breaking out of one's shell and talking about some of the problems that the self-help industry has with that. So to me, I can break this down into 3 specific points. And these 3 points are the failure expectation, struggling with the bigger picture, and the final one is dealing with trauma. So the very first thing I want to be talking about is the failure expectation. On the surface, it's a very bizarre kind of phenomenon, and it's the only thing that I can come up with to explain this phenomenon. It's very strange because, for one, it's an industry where people are trying to help one another and offer advice and guidance on all kinds of things. It's very strange because it leads to the question of why would someone offering you advice in the first place also wish for you to fail at the same time? And the best way that I can explain it is intentionally or unintentionally, a self-help guru can find themselves in this sort of situation where they're offering advice to people, but the advice doesn't really fit the person's specific situations. I'll be getting into some examples of this in a little bit, but generally speaking, because self-help advice is just so broad, we take those words as the absolute truth. Another way to be looking at this is it's a game of telephone, where one person is saying something, but the message is interpreted in a completely different way on the other end. And because part of being a self-help guru is to be confident in the advice that you're giving, a lot of people will get the impression that the guru knows what they're talking about and will trust them and will take their word for it, even if that guru has never experienced this before or has absolutely no idea what they're talking about or have experienced these kinds of situations that you're trying to communicate to them. What it ultimately creates is the advice that is given forms a loop for people, where you follow the person's advice and it doesn't work, and it ultimately leads to you feeling worse about yourself because you think that the advice giver is an authority figure who knows exactly what it is that they're talking about, and the advice that they're offering is not working. So I kind of think of social anxiety as that sort of situation where you're experiencing struggles with talking or trying to break out of your shell, and gurus kind of push people to believe that it's because they're dealing with social anxiety when it actually isn't. Or people do actually realize that they do have social anxiety and they are seeking help, but the advice is just so generalized that it doesn't really help with their own situation, and they're just caught into that loop where they're trying something out and it's not really working and it's just making matters worse. And all of that leads to the second aspect that I want to be talking about, and that is just that the advice that self-gurus give don't really see the bigger picture, because the advice is just generalized by design, and the guru is meant to be talking about the sort of advice with absolute confidence. We take those words as the absolute truth for us and the best kind of advice that we can use moving forward. After all, we are looking for help, and we're just about to take any kind of advice that's offered to us at this point on just how to be boosting your confidence. But because the guru doesn't have the full picture or understands your own specific situations, that advice is just so broad and generalized that, again, it just leads to that whole loop thing. And so because that advice is just so generalized, they're, again, ignoring specific aspects of yourself. Those specific aspects are both your mentality and also your physical environment. These two aspects are very important because they play a crucial role in how confident we are about certain things every single day. And they also have a factor in our own social anxiety and social skills. If you live in a very repressive environment where people don't consider your work or who you are as valuable, then you're going to be ending up with very bad habits and thinking very little about yourself. So it makes a lot of sense why you have a lot of social anxiety, because the people around you are really just bogging down on you and telling you that you're worthless or implying as such. And in certain cases, it might just be you that think that those people are thinking less of you because of those kinds of things. Ultimately, what it creates is this self-fulfilling prophecy where your environment instills these thoughts of incompetence, and when you're trying to fight back, your negative thinking will just create more and more of these problems for yourself and just reinforce this very regressive mentality of yourself. And I know this personally because I've experienced this for myself, not only with just dealing with middle school and high school teenage boy kind of problems, but I've also experienced this in various workplaces as well. There was one time where I was a bookkeeper for an insurance company, and I had a lot of feelings of incompetence for the job. Even though I studied bookkeeping for 2 years at that point, I still didn't really have a whole grasp on the various concepts and didn't have any idea of what it is that I was doing. Looking back at that experience, I know that the work environment that I was in at the time wasn't all that nurturing for me either. I had very little training to prepare myself for the job. It was just a bad workplace for me. So when it comes to that sort of information, if I just dumped all of this stuff on a self-help guru and they were trying to help me with my social anxiety, I have no doubt that they would be mentioning that this was just a toxic workplace environment that I was in and that I should leave. And that is exactly what I did. But for me, it was a lot easier for me to do because I had family that was very close by that I could just move back to without any issues whatsoever. Other people, though, don't really have that sort of opportunity, though. Some people have to be working in these very bad places for them, mentally speaking, because it's their livelihood, and leaving that workplace means losing out on some very important social safety nets for themselves that just creates more and more problems if they decide to back out of that. And so that's what I mean when gurus don't really see the bigger picture. They look at the immediate problem and say, this is what you should be doing, when they don't really account for a lot of the other nuances and other tiny little details. So all of this becomes more problematic when self-help gurus fail to address another aspect, trauma. Why failing to address trauma is such a problem is because these past experiences leave some kind of mental scarring on ourselves. They are particular moments where we are exposed to something extremely graphic in our lives that alters our mindset or really just changes our view of the world. And they play a very significant role in our confidence. I know for myself, I experienced flashes of various social moments I wish I could have done differently. These are normally scenarios in which I was a teenager or a kid, which I'm sure plenty of other people certainly have those kinds of awkward teen moments or what have you. And while they're not very graphic, can they did play a role in my social anxiety as I was wrestling with it and trying to overcome it. For a lot of other people, they can be even more traumatic, such as abuse, getting bullied, or experiencing some other kind of tragic event in their life. These are very big impressions that just simply can't go away. And one of the big problems with the self-help industry is they kind of look at those situations and say, hey, we can actually fix those sorts of things. They believe that a lot of therapy and things like that can really help with those kinds of things, and they certainly do. In terms of in terms of actually removing all of this entirely from your own mentality, is next to impossible. You just have to live with this sort of mental baggage, and therapy just really helps out with managing that sort of thing and having just a healthy medium in which you can actually communicate those kinds of things with you to other people. I mean, and these are ultimately these mental environments that I mentioned earlier. Not only can people affect the physical and mental ways of thinking, past events also just shape who we are. But as far as addressing the social anxiety, a self-help guru can also position themselves as this is just negative thinking, which is even more problematic because, again, just mental issues are definitely negative things that affect us, and they can alter our mindset to be thinking more negatively. But the problem is that this negative thinking can stem from a series of bad experiences, and they're also just deeply psychologically rooted within us, and they can't just be purged. So ultimately, people that are dealing with trauma and struggling through that and having that sort of trauma affect their own social anxiety, they just fall through the cracks because that advice doesn't really help them all that much, even though a lot of the general advice is just being like, hey, like, get out there and meet new people and talk with other people. There still is that worry that you're just going to be creating more traumatic moments for yourself later down the road. So there's not really much of a point in engaging with any person in the future. I know for myself, I failed to connect with other people and develop my social skills because I reached a point where I thought that these people I don't really see that much on a regular basis, so why bother trying to get to know them and interact with them? Part of that was just from the traumatic experiences that I experienced as a kid. Even though they weren't that serious, they led to that sort of thinking where there's no point in me trying to get to know someone or to engage with them because they're only going to be playing a brief role in my whole entire life. So what's the point? So because of those three problems that I presented, I find that a lot of self-help advice when it comes to social anxiety and improving yourself is just not that helpful because it doesn't address those particular issues all that well. So how does one break out of those kinds of things? Improving one's confidence is a lot tougher than what a lot of articles suggest. And so some of them might have some sound advice, like, again, seeing a therapist or traveling or just taking one step at a time and like talking to people and that sort of thing. But for those who are in those kind of like extreme situations that I've just mentioned, some particular advice that I found effective are things such as nudging yourself. If you're not confident about something, give yourself a little bit of space to at least try it out. It's like building a habit where you don't need to throw yourself into the deep end. The idea is to be making small changes and ensuring those changes are things you're comfortable with. So things such as saying hello to people on a regular basis, even if you don't know them. Just saying hello to strangers can really help things out with that. The second option is to just dive right into your own social anxiety and kind of like brute force the problem in the way that I did, where I just traveled for 9 months and forced myself to like engage with other people. I still didn't get as much of an experience out of it as I wanted to, but at the very least, like that sort of, if you have an opportunity to really just push yourself and to actually solve this issue, and you're at a point where you're just fed up with being like dealing with the social anxiety, sometimes like this can be like just a kick in the butt to get a move on with what you're trying to accomplish. My third tip is to just find some communities, specifically groups that do things that you're not confident in. Building a network of people that can encourage you to open up and gain confidence in something can make a world of difference. Beyond that, a community can serve as a sort of foundation for you to grow in more aspects, in that aspect of your life. Similarly, you can also find communities of or groups that are into similar interest to you. For example, there's a local game store that I go to that plays a lot of Magic the Gathering, so now I have more people that I can play the card game with than I had previously, and this also just broadens my social network of people and just my overall confidence in talking with people, especially since I spend a lot of time in my apartment. So this is just an opportunity for me to really get out and talk with other people and engage with the community. And my final tip is to start reworking your mindset. This isn't just applying to negative self-talk, but I would also challenge you to approach your problems in a different manner. Like I mentioned in my very first video back to YouTube, I'm trying a different format that works better for me at making these videos. Even if I'm dealing with a cold in the process, I still have a method that I'm pretty confident in and that I can slowly build myself up to in just being confident in making these videos compared to what I was doing before. It's also just brainstorming different approaches that you can take, and just being creative in how you can be building up your confidence. It could still take some adjustments, but just having some general ideas of things that you can go about and having some sort of plan is better than just throwing yourself out there and seeing wherever it takes you. And that's all I have to say about confidence building and just dealing with social anxiety. Thank you so much for watching the entirety of this video. Don't forget to go and leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this in the future.